It is cold case night here on Stay Tuned Now, and the murder of 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey.
Every year, more than 800,000 children go missing in the United States. Most of them are found within a few hours or days, but some of them are never seen again. JonBenét, born on 6th of August 1990 to John and Patsy Ramsey, spent a lot of time participating in and winning beauty pageants for children. By the age of 6, she had earned several titles such as America's Royale, Miss Little Miss Colorado, and National Tiny Miss Beauty. Additionally, she had taken some glamour photos, which some people later thought were not suitable for her age. Apart from her involvement in pageants, JonBenét led a fairly normal life. She went to High Peaks Elementary School in Boulder, Colorado, living with her rich parents and older brother Burke. On 25th of December 1996, they celebrated Christmas as a family, marking the little girl's final one. According to her parents, everything seemed fine when they tucked her into bed that night. Only the person or people responsible for her death know exactly what occurred between that night and the early morning of the next day. The Ramseys realized something was wrong at 5:30 a.m. when Patsy found a piece of paper on the staircase. What she had found was a 2.5-page ransom note. In the message, the writer said, "We have your daughter, asked for $18,000 for JonBenét's safe return, and promised to provide more details by 10 a.m. the next day." "I just remember reading 'We have your daughter,'" Patsy Ramsey later said. "I just felt really anxious. I hurried back up those stairs as fast as I could and opened her door." Patsy explained that because JonBenét wasn't in her room, she woke up her husband and called 911. "We have a kidnapping," she urgently told the operator. "Hurry, please. There's a note left and our daughter's gone." Despite searches by the police, family, and friends, there was no sign of the girl in the house. Most of the officers left after a few hours, leaving Linda Arndt, a detective, to stay with JonBenét's parents. Arndt, who found it strange that neither parent reacted when the kidnappers didn't contact them by 10 a.m., suggested that John Ramsey do a second search of the house. She told him he might notice if anything seemed out of place. John then went to the basement, which the police hadn't searched it yet. There he found JonBenét's body. She had been brutally beaten on the head, strangled with a nylon cord and one of her mother's paintbrushes, and possibly violated. "I knew instantly what I found. I found my daughter," John Ramsey later said. "She was lying on a white blanket. The blanket was wrapped around her. Her hands were tied above her head. She had tape over her mouth." After this shocking discovery, the Boulder Police Department made several mistakes that affected the investigation, such as letting JonBenét's father move the body and not conducting separate interviews with the parents. Even before the body was found, the police let many people enter the house, messing up the crime scene. Some visitors even cleaned the place, possibly erasing any clues left by the potential killer. It's believed that the police's failure to properly secure the entire crime scene is a big reason why solving the case has been so tough. The subsequent examination of JonBenét's death painted a grim picture. The 6-year-old's cause of death was asphyxia by strangulation with associated craniocerebral trauma. In simpler terms, she was severely hit in the head and strangled. John and Patsy Ramsey didn't take long to become suspects. Since JonBenét's body was found in her family's home, it's likely that a close relative was involved in her death. Furthermore, her parents quickly sought legal representation, raising suspicion. Early investigations did seem to focus on the Ramsey home. The rope used to strangle JonBenét? It was made from one of Patsy's paintbrushes. The paper for the ransom note? It was taken from a notepad in the house. The pen used? Also found at home. Even the ransom note's content raised doubts. Firstly, it was unusually long for a ransom note, which is typically short. Additionally, the demand for money was specific. $18,000, precisely the bonus John Ramsey received that year. The police quickly saw John and Patsy Ramsey as their main suspects. The suspicion was that they accidentally caused JonBenét's death and then arranged the scene to make it look like an intruder was responsible. Meanwhile, JonBenét's parents strongly denied the accusations. However, as the investigation continued, some detectives started exploring other possibilities. Initially, Lou Smith, a retired Colorado detective brought in to assist, suspected the parents. However, the more he looked into it, the more he doubted their guilt. Instead, Smith believed that an intruder had come in through one of the home's open windows, particularly the basement window. Using evidence like an unfamiliar shoe print near the crime scene and a possible stun gun mark on JonBenét's body, he argued that this unknown person was the one who killed JonBenét Ramsey. Yet most bolder police officers still considered JonBenét's parents as suspects. Smith eventually quit the case out of frustration. "I cannot in good conscience be a part of the persecution of innocent people," Smith stated. "It would be highly improper and unethical for me to stay when I so strongly believe this." But perhaps the most surprising theory is that Burke, JonBenét's 9-year-old brother at the time, was responsible for her death. This theory gained traction after the 2016 CBS documentary series, The Case of JonBenét Ramsey. According to the documentary, undigested pineapple was found in JonBenét's intestines, and a tray of pineapple was discovered in the kitchen. However, Patsy denied having prepared pineapple for JonBenét. According to the controversial theory, Burke prepared the pineapple as a midnight snack. However, when JonBenét took a piece, Burke reportedly hit her on the head with an object, possibly a flashlight. Assuming JonBenét was dead, their parents staged her murder scene. In response to the series, Burke Ramsey sued CBS for $750 million, but the case was settled out of court. If the parents or her brother didn't murder JonBenét Ramsey, then who did? Unless the family murderer theory can be definitively proven, the most likely explanation is that of a home intruder. See if you agree with our supporting evidence that an intruder killed JonBenét and leave us a comment in the comment section below. Watch until the end when one of the world's most famous profilers gives their opinion on the case. Reason 1. The presence of evidence suggesting JonBenét had been sexually violated is one of the most significant indicators that this was an intruder crime, as it is unusual for a husband and wife to collaborate to conceal abuse committed by only one of them. This evidence is inconclusive, and it's unclear whether or not she was ever sexually abused. There was no evidence of sperm, and the official conclusion is that sexual assault cannot be ruled out. Reason 2. If the parents were driven to kill their daughter to cover up their son's attack, garroting would not be the chosen method. It is too slow, intimate, and inhumane. Reason 3. The blood stain on JonBenét's undergarments had DNA from 2 people who were not part of the Ramsey family. Reason 4. The police found an unlocked door in the Ramsey home, and 2 basement windows were left open for Christmas light cables. Another basement window was broken before JonBenét's murder, suggesting a possible entry point, although later information discredited this. Reason 5. In the months leading up to the murder, there were more than 100 burglaries in the Ramsey's neighborhood, with 38 registered sex offenders living within a 2-mile radius of their home. JonBenét's visibility as a child beauty pageant contestant made some believe she could be more vulnerable to abduction by a stranger. Reason 6. No traces of blood were found in the Ramsey home, indicating that JonBenét was likely already dead or close to death when the head trauma occurred. This contradicts the idea that strangulation was used as a cover-up after Burke harmed his sister, as the first method employed was strangulation. Reason 7. The renowned profiler John Douglas, who is often referred to as the Mind Hunter, worked with the Ramsey family and firmly believes they are innocent. In the true crime world, Douglas's opinion is highly respected. According to John, Douglas's theory formed over decades of profiling the scenario involving JonBenét is as follows. Her killer was a young white male with a personal grudge against John Ramsey, intending to defile and rob him of the most precious thing in his life. He entered the house when the family was away, either through the basement or with one of the many unaccounted-for keys to the Ramsey home. Carrying a stun gun, duct tape, and a spool of cord, his plan was to incapacitate, abduct, and molest her. The ransom demand was an afterthought and might explain why it was written on materials found in the home. He had no intention of collecting such a low sum. He was merely trying to make a point and possibly divert suspicion toward the Ramseys. It's also conceivable that he had already written a shorter and more concise ransom note, but given the time he had alone, ended up composing a longer one. He entered JonBenét's room, used a quiet air taser stun gun to disable her, taped her mouth, and took her downstairs. Strangulation began during or right after the molestation, unintentionally causing her death. Realizing his actions, he swiftly struck her head, and instead of taking her, he fled the house in panic. If we consider Douglas's and others' claims about a home intruder who could be potential suspects, Gary Oliva, a 32-year-old known sexual offender residing in Boulder, Colorado, when JonBenét was found strangled, suggesting a possible sexual assault. In 2000, during his arrest on narcotics charges, police reportedly discovered a magazine cutout of JonBenét Ramsey in his backpack. Though he was released, suspicions persisted. Ollie Gray, a private investigator for the Ramsey family, once described Oliva's links to JonBenét as a bombshell arrest and criticized the Boulder PD for not viewing him as a more credible suspect. Shortly afterward, Oliva's high school friend Michael Vale backed up Gray's suspicion with a claim. Vale asserted that soon after the murder, a distressed Oliva called him and confessed, saying, "I heard a little girl. I heard a little girl." Vale also mentioned to a magazine reporter that he was troubled by the similarity between the knots used in the garrote that strangled JonBenét and those used when Oliva attempted to strangle his mother with a telephone cord. There were also rumors connecting Oliva to a theory that linked the markings found on JonBenét's body to a possible stun gun encounter. At the time of his initial arrest, Oliva had a stun gun in his possession. Although DNA testing cleared him of JonBenét's murder, he later faced charges of child sexual exploitation for having child pornography. Michael Helgoth, an electrician who worked at a nearby auto salvage yard, was another potential suspect, according to Ollie Gray. Gray described Helgoth as a troublemaker involved in an alleged property dispute with the Ramsey family. Could this be a possible reason for seeking revenge against the family and kidnapping JonBenét, as suggested by John Douglas in his profile? Some believe that when 26-year-old Helgoth found out he might be a suspect and authorities discovered a boot print near the Ramsey residence that resembled his, he took his own life before they could reach him. His death occurred 2 days after the Boulder DA announced a new suspect in a press conference in 1997. Helgoth has seemingly been cleared by inconclusive DNA evidence. John Mark Carr, a former school teacher, confessed in explicit detail in 2006 to strangling JonBenét in 1996. After facing child pornography charges in the U.S., Carr was arrested in Thailand, where he had been living as a fugitive. The now 58-year-old initially inserted himself into the case by emailing Michael Tracy, a professor at the University of Colorado Boulder, producing a documentary on the case. When the emails took a disturbing turn, revealing the man's inappropriate fixation with JonBenét, Tracy reported Carr to the Bangkok police, leading to his detention as a potential suspect. His genetic material did not match the DNA profile of an unidentified male found on JonBenét's Long John's waistline. After being taken to Boulder for questioning, he was eventually cleared. Carr's delusional confession included several diary entries supposedly written at the crime scene. In one dramatic account, Carr claimed to have strangled JonBenét during a failed love game. Despite Carr's alleged involvement, making international headlines, and his insistence that he killed her, he was ultimately dismissed as a suspect and labeled a pedophile seeking notoriety. According to a report, the former suspect now lives in the Pacific Northwest under a new name and gender. Despite numerous confessions, clues, and conspiracy theories, authorities are no closer to solving the case in 2023 than in 1996. Even decades after the murder, the question remains: who murdered JonBenét Ramsey? Time will tell if we ever receive a definitive answer. For now, the full truth about JonBenét Ramsey's death tragically died with her.